Hello and welcome to the Natural History Museum's YouTube Live. My name is Josh and tonight we are going to give you an exciting sneak peek at the museum's latest exhibition, Birds, Brilliant and Bizarre. Over the next 20 minutes or so, we're going to be joined by exhibition staff and museum scientists to talk everything avian. And don't forget, this is entirely live, so if you have any burning questions that you want to ask any of our experts, then pop them into the chat and we will do our best to answer them as we go through some of the exhibition behind me. Now, without further ado, let's go and meet our first expert, Sophie. Hi, Sophie.
Hi, Josh.
How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you.
Can we start by explaining, I guess, who you are and what it is that you do here at the museum?
I'm Sophie and I work for the exhibitions team here at the Natural History Museum, and we're the team responsible for making these special exhibitions and the permanent galleries that visitors see when they come to the museum.
Very exciting. I suppose the first question we should ask is, why birds? Why are we choosing this subject?
Yeah, great question. Birds are a fascinating group of animals and they're incredibly successful. They live across the globe from polar ice sheets through to tropical rainforests. And why now is because recent reports have shown that birds are in trouble globally. So 50% of birds are in decline and 1 in 8 species are threatened with extinction.
Wow, that's an extraordinary number.
It is an extraordinary number, 1 in 8 threatened with extinction. So we thought it was a really good time to shine a light on birds and look at some of their brilliant and bizarre survival strategies, how they've adapted over 150 million years to be the amazing species we have today.
I mean, because when you look around, there is like a huge diversity of birds on display, which I guess is part of the point.
Yes, from tiny zebra finches that can sing to their unhatched chicks still within the egg to influence their development, through to these beautiful birds of paradise that we see behind us with the males with these elaborate plumages.
And I was wondering if you could explain to us a little bit about what goes into making an exhibition like this, because obviously it's quite a long, involved process.
Yeah, sure. So where we're standing, you can see that there are cases which are filled with specimens. There are sounds around us when you first come in. There are sounds of bird calls. There are interactive games that you can play. And really getting to this point, from where we very first had the idea of having an exhibition on birds, takes about 2.5 years.
Wow. I don't think most people would realise it's such an involved process. I guess you've been thinking about birds a lot for the last couple of years.
Yeah, and really for that first half of that time, we're thinking about what are the most interesting specimens that we can pull out. We're looking at the survival tactics that birds have evolved. What are the best stories that we can tell about that? And then the second half is really thinking about what the design of the space is going to be and what we can put in for people to use and play.
We are currently stood in the section about, is it breeding behaviours, right?
And yeah, we're in a section on courtship.
Quite fun stories to go around here, aren't there?
Yeah, so I mean, talking about diversity of behaviours and unusual behaviours, here is a great bustard.
Wow, it's huge.
And it is huge. So this is the male and that's the female. So you can see that the male has quite an elaborate plumage, which it plumps up. In the wild, they go even further than this. They look like balls of feathers on legs. But the males go one step further because in mating season, they eat more of a toxic beetle.
Wow.
And scientists think that they're doing this because the toxic beetle, although it could potentially be lethal to the great bustard, it's killing parasites in it and it's making it look healthier, particularly around its rear. Because when females are selecting a partner, they're going to rigorously inspect the rear to make sure that this is a healthy specimen, and then he gets an opportunity to pass on his genes to the next generation.
She's basically doing a health check before she decides to settle down with him.
Yeah, and he's looking after his health by eating toxic beetles.
That's an extraordinary story. And when it comes to birds, it's not obviously just about the visual display, is it? It's also about the sound is something we obviously associate quite heavily with birds. And I was wondering how you incorporate that into a visual exhibition like this.
Yeah, so when you come into the exhibition, you will hear bird calls from around the world. Above us, there are the chatterings of a murmuration of starlings. Sound is incredibly important to birds. So, for example, we have a palm cockatoo, which is the only animal on Earth, apart from humans, who can make a tool to make a drumming sound. They make a drumming stick, and males will drum that stick onto hollow logs and tree trunks to attract a female by saying, I found a great spot for us to make a nest.
They're basically making their own musical instrument, I suppose.
They're making their own musical instrument, and researchers have found by spending hours of watching footage and listening to sounds that the males, each individual male, has a unique style of drumming. They've got their own sense of rhythm.
That's cool. We've had a few questions come in already, so thank you very much, everyone at home watching. The first one is, I was wondering if you could answer from Instagram, what is your favourite specimen on display? Maybe it's like choosing a child. I'm not
I mean,
sure.
the palm cockatoo's looking at me like, come on, I'm fantastic in it. But I would actually probably choose a barn owl, which is quite a familiar bird to many people. And they have these beautiful heart-shaped faces. Their feathers create a heart shape. And that's a special adaptation which helps them to hunt. So barn owls are nocturnal, they hunt at night, and they need to find rodents which are underneath snow or underneath leaves. So they rely on their hearing to do this. And the beautiful pattern of their face feathers is actually a way of directing sound into their ears.
Wow.
It's like a parabolic dish.
Wow, that's so cool.
They look beautiful,
yeah,
but
they do.
it has a very specific reason.
Very good function. We've got a few more questions coming in. I think a very important question. Do we have penguins in the exhibition?
We have a macaroni penguin in the exhibition.
That's what everyone wants to hear. And do you know from Lemon Basil, thank you Lemon Basil, what the biggest bird is?
It depends how you're measuring it a little bit.
Okay.
So the biggest bird is the ostrich, but if you're thinking about wingspan, then it's an albatross who have a wingspan that can go to 3.5 meters, and we do have an albatross in the exhibition.
So it depends, yeah, okay, so it depends on whether you're doing it by like weight or size or however you want to cut it. Nice. And when it comes to the specimens that are on display, obviously some of them are from the museum, but they don't all come from here. I was wondering if you could talk about, I guess, how these specimens are chosen and where they're coming from and that side.
Yeah, great question. So the museum has been collecting bird specimens for the last 200 years, and there's over 1 million specimens that we have. And we work with the museum curators to pull out the best examples of survival techniques. But there are some cases where there's a story we'd like to illustrate, where we may go to different institutions and ask for a loan. So for example, from Museums Wales, we have this example of a hat, and that has got a bird of paradise stuck onto it. It's from about 1920, and at the turn of the last century, birds of paradise were hunted in extraordinary numbers, about 80,000 a year, were hunted from the wild and imported into Europe to decorate clothing, such as hats like this.
Wow, that's an extraordinary number.
Yeah, and then in 1921, after the RSBB was set up and had campaigned for years, a law was passed that banned the importation of feathers.
And I suppose that was going to lead me on to my next question about, you mentioned before the sort of importance, the relevance of this exhibition at this moment in time. And I was just wondering, what do you want people to go away from this exhibition thinking or feeling about birds?
I hope that people will see birds in a new light. So birds have been around for 150 million years. They're living dinosaurs.
Yeah.
They almost didn't make it through the extinction event, which killed all the other dinosaurs. And they've gone on to flourish and become the most amazing creatures. And I hope people come away recognizing that each individual species, it's worth watching them and it's worth listening to them and it's worth protecting them.
I mean, one of my favourite specimens, it's a bit earlier on in the exhibition, it's the eider duck, the jungle fowl and the emu, because those are the birds that survived the extinction event.
Yeah,
right?
well, their ancestors are the ones who had evolved about 70 million years ago and were a few birds that made it through that extinction event to then become the diversity of bird life that we have today.
I love the fact that the chicken beat the dinosaurs. That always pleases me greatly. We have a couple more questions that have come through. One from Jessart. I'll ask you this. Do you know what the most endangered bird is? It's quite a hard, tricky question to answer, I guess.
It is, because there are many species who are on the brink of extinction. In the exhibition, you'll see a Philippine eagle, which is one of the most endangered species. There's only a few hundred of them left in the wild, and it is the largest eagle.
Gosh, that is only 500 of them left. That's quite shocking, actually, isn't it? But, and I guess that's, again, the theme of this exhibition really is sort of the peril and the conservation, but also how we need to sort of protect them, I suppose.
Yeah, well, it's a celebration of birds, and it's looking at how they've managed to survive and thrive this long in all these wonderful different ways, from making tools, using their intelligence, from being able to dive into water from 45 meters up with an adaptation that won't break their neck. They're amazing creatures, and it's looking at the diversity of that life, as well as looking to a future where, if we act now, we can change the way that that the environments are looked after, and birds will be able to thrive alongside us.
Well, thank you so much for taking your time to talk to us and talk to people at home about
Josh.
what you've been doing. It's really lovely. We're going to move on to the next section now, so thank you so much, Sophie. If you follow me, we're going to go this way. We're going to join museum scientist, Dr. Alex Bond. Hi, Alex.
Hi, Josh.
Could you just start by telling everyone at home who you are and what you do at the museum?
So my name is Alex Bond. I'm the principal curator and curator in charge of the bird collection here at the NHM.
So, yeah, I mean, critical, I guess, to this exhibition.
I mean, we're thrilled to have so many specimens in the galleries, some real gems that have never been on display before, and some personal favorites of ours as well.
Excellent. Well, we are going to go and explore some of these specimens behind us here. So this is moving into the section which is about bird senses and how they perceive the world.
Exactly, exactly. So we've got a great example here. We've got some blue tits, which a lot of folks will recognize from their garden. But you might not realize that they can actually see in UV as well.
Wow.
So we've got 3 color sensors in our eyes. We can see red, green, and blue. These guys can also see in UV.
Wow. And can all birds see in UV? Is that a normal thing?
Most birds can. Some of the birds of prey and some of the seabirds can, but most of the garden birds that we'll see and be familiar with will be able to see in UV.
And what is the advantage to that? Why are they doing that?
It's a great way to sort of show off and look a little bit different, sometimes indicating quality, while mammalian predators won't necessarily be able to see that signal.
Oh, wow. So it's almost like they can sort of show themselves off whilst in the foliage and no one else can see it.
Exactly. It's like a little secret bird code.
That's really cute. I think you mentioned earlier as well about the barn owls also have this, right?
Exactly. So barn owls under UV, their wings will actually glow red.
Wow.
Which you wouldn't expect looking at sort of a brown and white owl.
And you wouldn't expect that for something that's trying to be sort of stealthy, I suppose, either. But
Yeah. But again, it's that signal of quality. And when you're looking to mate and find a partner, that's what they're looking at.
This is both of those are found in the UK, so we do have a question come through from the chat. How can people at home help to conserve birds in the UK?
I mean, amazing. I mean, probably the best thing to do is to get involved with local groups and surveys. There's lots of organizations that are doing conservation and basic monitoring work, counting birds in local patches, and that all contributes to our assessment of basically the state of birds in the UK.
Nice. And moving on, in this case, I mean, there's some other fantastic adaptations. One of my favorites is this rather beautiful spoonbill skeleton.
Yes.
I was wondering if you could talk us through why that is here.
So spoonbills have this fantastic bill, obviously. It's where they get their name. And if you can see on the tip, they've got some very, very small pits. And those enable them, when they're swishing that bill back and forth in the water, to detect prey. And yeah, it's just a fantastic adaptation to be able to do that.
And presumably that's why is that extraordinarily wide shape? Is that to increase the number of sensory cells?
Exactly. Basically, the surface area, the bigger the beak, the more chance you're going to find some food.
Excellent. We've had a couple more questions come through. We've had a couple more questions come through at the moment. Jade Midwinter wants to know what is the most common bird in the world?
Oh, the most common bird in the world is actually the domestic chicken.
Of course.
So yeah, they number actually in the billions.
Wow.
In terms of wild birds, it's probably the red-billed quelea, which is a finch that's found in eastern and southern Africa.
Wow. How many, do we know how many of them now?
They're in the billions.
Whoa.
Yeah,
Okay.
they're really, really common.
Doing very well for themselves. We've had another question come through from the chat. Alex, what is your favourite specimen?
My favorite specimen.
Yeah.
So my favorite specimen is in near towards the end of the gallery, and it's actually not a bird. It's a canary resuscitator.
What?
It's a small piece of kit that looks like a cross between a sort of Jacques Cousteau dive helmet and a bird cage. And when miners would take canaries down into the coal mines, which is a practice that went on in the UK until the 1980s, if your canary suddenly looked like he was doing unwell or started to expire, you could put him in this little glass box and oxygen would be pumped in. So as somebody said the other night, your canaries were no longer just single use.
Wow, that's amazing. And I guess if you want to go and see it, you have to come and see the exhibition to see that specimen.
Exactly.
Someone also asked me what my favourite specimen is, and we are going to get to it, so don't worry about that. Before we move on from the spoonbill, someone has a question about it. Do we get them in the UK?
We do, yeah. They definitely occur in the UK, European spoonbill.
Nice. And then moving on, so we've got also this rather lovely shearwater down here, which is kind of quite relevant to your work, right?
Yeah, so this is a Manx shearwater, so one of the more common seabirds that we get in the UK. And on the top of their bill, they've got these 2 little nostrils. And that means that they can smell prey from miles and miles away at sea. And that's an adaptation that this whole group of seabirds has, the albatrosses, petrels, and shearwaters.
So does that mean that they are smelling the food under the water.
Exactly. The food under the water, the smell, the chemicals released by that comes up into the air. And we've got a nice little smell box here where you can give it a go yourself if you're feeling adventurous.
That absolutely blows my mind that they can smell their food under the water from the air.
They've got one of the best olfactory senses of any bird group in the world.
Wow. And your work is also related to this because you work on another species of shearwater in the Pacific Ocean, right?
That's right. So we work on shearwaters in Australia, and the problem that they have is they eat plastics. And plastics accumulate this biofilm when they're in the ocean, this organic layer, and that often smells like food. And we think that's why the birds are eating it.
That's really sad.
Yeah.
And we could sort of move on to the next bit, which we will get to. This is now my favourite. This is my favourite specimen because we're going to come over here. We're going to look at the rather lovely kagu, and this is again more about sort of bird behaviour, right, and how they defend themselves against other things, right?
Exactly. So kagus found in New Caledonia, which is an island off the northeast coast of Australia. And they do this fantastic display where their crest goes up and their wings go out. I'm doing a terrible impression.
I think it's great.
And that works really well for small ground-based predators. And it even works for some of the introduced predators in New Caledonia, like cats. But when you get into bigger predators like some of the dogs and people, they still make that display, but it's not really effective enough.
More kagu.
Yeah.
I know, they're such delightfully strange birds. One of my favourites. And we've had plenty more questions coming through, so thank you everyone at home. And if you have some, obviously send them through. Someone wants to know, what is the noisiest bird?
The noisiest bird is a bellbird, and this is found in Central Africa, and they can make a call that's more than 120 decibels, which is the sound of a jet engine taking off.
Wow, that's wild.
Yeah.
Any particular reason they're so loud?
This is for communication.
Okay.
Again, it's a signal of how good and how fit they are. That loud call can travel a huge distance.
I bet. We have a comparison question: which is bigger, an emu or a cassowary?
Oh gosh, a cassowary is just marginally bigger,
Okay.
but yeah, they're both about the same size. But cassowaries will just nip them out a little bit.
Excellent. Another great bird, another favourite of mine. We have one from Jim A. Thank you. Which country has the most bird species?
So birds, the most diverse country in terms of birds is Colombia, because you've got everything. You've got rainforests, you've got coasts, you've got the mountains, you've got the Andes. And with the Andes, you've got speciation and diversification on different mountain peaks. So I think there's something like 1,700 species of birds found in Colombia. And for comparison, in the UK, the official British list stands at just over 600.
That's extraordinary.
Yeah.
Wow.
So almost 3 times the number.
They're really, pulling their weight there.
Definitely.
And if we keep on going through, we get to another bit, which one of my, again, another great specimen, favourite of mine. We're going into sort of bird movements and migrations. Is that correct?
Exactly.
And we have one sort of very famous example of bird migration, like how that was first discovered, right?
That's right. So we've got a model here. This is a model of a file stork. Or arrow stork, which is a white stork, which we're slowly reintroducing to the UK, but it's got a spear through its neck. So he's not having a great day. But that bird was able to migrate from Central Africa back to Germany, where it was unfortunately shot 202 years ago yesterday.
Wow. Very relevant.
And because the bird had this amazing spear through its neck, which we knew was not from Germany, that was the first clue that these birds went somewhere else and didn't just disappear into the ether.
I think it's quite, obviously bird migration is so sort of normalised for us. It's quite easy to forget or not think that it was completely unknown until this bird came back from Africa with a spear in it.
Exactly. We used to think that birds would either transmogrify and turn into different species that would appear in the winter, or burrow into mud and sandbanks in lakes. And some folks even thought that birds, when they disappeared, they flew to the moon.
We've had another question come through about bird migration. Why do birds migrate?
Birds migrate to follow the food, is the long story short. So species that rely on reasonably energy-rich foods will follow that pulse of food, which is why you tend to get a lot of migratory species that might breed in the northern hemisphere and then migrate down south and then come back again. And they don't want to stay down south because there's already a lot of birds down there. So there's a competition issue. So they think, right, I'm going to go up north for a little bit, but they can only stay for so long.
Otherwise it gets too cold and they get hungry, like me, I guess. But it's not just, I mean, this is one of my favorite things. It's not just moving from place to place, though, is it? I mean, some animals also go up and down, right?
Exactly, yeah. So we've got this Himalayan monal here, which is a type of pheasant, which just looks absolutely stunning with the iridescence.
Lovely and shiny.
And they migrate up and down mountains. Cool. So again, moving with temperature, moving with that resource pulse, but instead of traveling distance, they travel altitude.
Another question which has come through, which is very relevant. Which bird has the longest migration?
The longest migration, we've got an example here. It's the Arctic tern. So they breed in the Arctic, and then when they're done, they do this fantastic, almost figure-of-8 migration, spend the winter down off the Antarctic ice pack, covering about 80,000 kilometers a year.
That's an extraordinary distance to travel for such a small bird, really.
If they weigh 120 grams, which is about half a pack of butter, and it's the longest animal migration anywhere in the world.
And talking about flying, obviously that's quite a lot of flying. How long does it take birds to learn to fly?
They do it really, really quickly. So, because it's so essential, they might practice flapping their wings in the nest, but basically when a bird fledges, which in some species can be, maybe 2 weeks after they hatch, they'll be up and flying around. They're not perfect right out of the nest, but they've got to get good really quick because otherwise there's somebody's dinner.
And they've got quite far to travel as well.
Some of them absolutely do. So Arctic terns, the chicks will fledge after 3 weeks. They'll hang around for a little bit, stretch their wings, but then very quickly they'll be off.
They've got 40,000 kilometers to fly.
80,000.
80,000.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow, that's very quick learners. We've got some more questions coming through. Another one from Lemon Basil. Are birds dinosaurs?
Birds are dinosaurs. They're the survivors of the dinosaurs, that great asteroid impact that occurred about 65 million years ago. The ground-dwelling birds were the ones that survived.
My favorite, the ducks.
Absolutely.
Lots of questions coming through, so thank you so much, and lots about flight at the moment. So Louise wants to know, do swifts have adaptations to enable them to stay in the air for so long?
Yes, so swifts have these great big long wings, which means they're really efficient at flying. Birds have hollow bones, they don't have teeth, and a really efficient respiratory system. And these all help birds fly for a really long time. And swifts, because they've got those really, really long pointed wings, means they're just like little jet fighters.
Extraordinary. I love a swift. I love the screaming that they do as they're wheeling overhead. Absolutely one of my favorites. We have another one from Ross Brooks. Thank you, Ross. How do birds sleep when migrating such long distances?
This is fantastic. So birds can actually turn off half their brain at a time. So for some birds like albatrosses, they'll just lock their wings open and just glide, and they can turn off the left side, and then they can sleep the left side, and then they can turn off the right side and sleep on the right side. So there's always a little bit of part of them that's around, but part of them can still get some rest.
And they're just, I guess, effectively on autopilot.
More or less. It's something I wish I could do.
We need to get. We've had what is the largest bird, but what is the smallest bird?
The smallest bird is the bee hummingbird.
Okay.
And this is found in Cuba, and I kid you not, it's about the size of a matchstick.
So tiny.
Yeah.
Compared to the ostrich, which is obviously massive. This is quite a good question. Thank you very much. What bird has the strangest habits?
Oh gosh, the strangest habits. I mean, birds, the exhibition is called Birds, Brilliant and Bizarre.
There's a lot of bizarre.
And I think probably my favorite bizarre behavior has got to be hoopos. Okay. And what they do is they actually defecate on their own eggs as a way of getting rid of virulent microbes. So they've got an antimicrobial guano that basically means that the eggs won't become, and the chicks won't become infected with bacteria.
I feel a bit sorry for those chicks, to be honest.
Yeah, indeed.
Sorry for the adults. We mentioned it before, but one of the sort of main threads connecting all of these stories is the sort of conservation and how we protect birds. And we have this rather lovely specimen right above us, don't we?
Exactly.
Which is a red kite. And this is sort of quite a good example of conservation in practice. And I was wondering if you could talk us through, what the story of the red kite and what the result of it, I guess.
Yeah, it's a great conservation success story. So they were really abundant in the time of Shakespeare. And then sort of between the 16th and 19th centuries, they were basically shot, poisoned, and extirpated from the UK. So they were completely gone. In the late 1980s, we started to reintroduce them, particularly in the south of England. And now they've just absolutely taken off. And you can see them over huge areas. Somebody was telling me they've started to see them down in Kent. And you're starting to see them, move further north, up into, Leicester and up towards Birmingham. Their major site of introduction is sort of around Reading, so you often see them along the highway there.
Motorways, yeah. I didn't realise they were completely extirpated from
Exactly.
the UK.
Yeah, they were completely gone from the UK. And for those of us who live in the south of the UK, it's one of the more iconic birds of prey that we see on a regular basis.
And there's a recent report the last couple of days, wasn't there, about how well their numbers are now doing?
Exactly. So the last breeding bird survey report came out, and these guys have actually gone up something like 2,000%. In the last 20-odd years.
That's extraordinary.
Yeah.
We've had another chat come in from Everin. Question. This is a really lovely one. Which bird has the nicest call to you?
Oh gosh, to me, for me, it's got to be the chip-chaff. For me, that's the first sign of spring. That chip-chaff that you hear, it signals the end of winter in my book. So that's my favorite.
Ah, delightful. I just want to say thank you so much for spending the time talking to us, Alex. It has been really, really lovely. And thank you so much for watching at home. That's all we've got time for, I'm afraid. So first of all, thank you for tuning in and watching. And if you like what you saw, then don't forget to subscribe to the museum's Natural History Museum's YouTube channel. And obviously, don't forget to book your tickets to come and see Birds Brilliant and Bizarre. You can do that by clicking on the link below. And just another massive thank you for your questions and for watching.